Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories Podcast, Europe Edition. This is your host, John DeLynn. It is September 23rd, 2018. For those who have been following, I came with Jeremy Runnels to Europe. We spent some time in Sweden, and we interviewed Hans Mattsson, Birgitta Mattsson, and several Swedish saints, including Christina Hinke, about the Sweden Rescue, or the Swedish Rescue, about Hans Mattsson's new book, Truth Seeking, and just with an attempt to not only honor Hans and Birgitta and help people learn about their book, but also to honor the Swedish saints for their contributions in bringing, I'll just say, intellectual enlightenment to Mormons back in the United States and around the world. So we had that wonderful event. And we also interviewed some Norwegians while we were there. And then we actually traveled to Switzerland and had a Mormon Stories Faith Crisis workshop in Switzerland. And I was super happy to learn that there was at least one Swiss Mormon who was willing to share his story. And this will be the first ever Mormon Stories interview with someone from Switzerland, with someone who's Swiss. And his name is Philipp Gysler, and his story is important, and it's interesting, and I'm really excited, Philipp Gysler, to have you on Mormon Stories Podcast, Europe Edition. Thank you for joining us.
John, it's great to be here and finally meet you in person after all these years of listening to Mormon Stories.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. There will be lots of cool themes in this interview. We'll be talking about what it's like to grow up in the church in Europe and specifically in Switzerland. Philip comes from one of those, I'll just say, blue-blooded or royal or elite Mormon families in Switzerland. I believe his father served as a stake president, if I'm not mistaken. And he himself has served as a branch president and in stake high councils. And we'll be talking about a little bit about divorce. We'll be talking a little bit about second marriages. We'll be talking about Philip's journey as a Mormon, growing up, what it was like to grow up as a Mormon in Switzerland. And lots of cool stories along the way. He became a successful, I don't know if entrepreneur is the right word, or businessman, but his business efforts were very successful. And then he came to a point where his traditional Orthodox Mormon faith became challenged, and we'll learn about how that came about and how he and his family responded to it. So it's going to be an interesting and an epic interview.
I look forward.
All right. So let's begin, Philip. Talk a little bit about, we've already referenced this when we interviewed people from the UK a little bit, and then in the Swedish interview and in the Norwegian interview, but talk about the role of kind of these royal or blue-blooded elite Mormon families and how they play a role in European countries and the LDS Church as a context for your family story. Because that seems to come up in every interview I do, and it seems to be kind of the backbone of the church in Europe. Do you understand what I'm asking you about that?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so maybe start there.
Yes. So, like in other countries in Europe, in Switzerland, the church is very small, but it has a long tradition. So the first missionaries, I think, came about 1850 to Switzerland. And at that time, it was the Gathering of Zion. So a lot of the members, they moved to the U.S. And so there is actually a lot of Swiss or members in the U.S. that have Swiss blood or Swiss heritage. But for those who stayed, the few who stayed, they really had to build up the church. And while the church is very small, the church is actually quite strong because it is such a minority that those who really cling onto the church, they really have to stand for something and really, face also opposition. Or when I was younger, even, some persecution by friends. You were really completely different. So as an example, in the school that I was in, I was the only Mormon, obviously, And all my other fellow students, they were either Catholic or Protestant. And religious life, while they were not strongly religious, still in the school curriculum, religion was taught, and I was not part of that. And so there was a lot of questions. Well, where do you go to church? And anything outside of Catholicism or Protestantism is basically a sect. And so
and when Europeans say sect, I think the best translation for U.S. Mormons is cult. Is that fair to say? Or, does sect translate into the kind of the cult meaning in the U.S. when you say the word sect?
Yes, maybe. I mean, cult is even, I would say, stronger. And also the term sect over the years, I think also the Mormon Church has gained more visibility and has a little bit secularized to the point that it's not considered a sect anymore.
Okay.
But if you look at the membership, then there you see that it's centered around families with very strong tradition that often go back several generations and really form the pillars of the church in Switzerland, and the growth always being after that first wave of conversions, maybe post or before and after Second World War. In the last 20 years, the growth really coming from within, organic growth by way of family, and the rest being more refugees or people with high social mobility that occasionally join the church, but the strong pillar really coming from within these families.
So are there any stories or lore about like the first Swiss converts or some of the early families when you're growing up in a Switzerland ward or branch? Do they tell stories about some family or some man who joined the church early on and became, a leader? And if not, maybe you can just name some of the families that would be viewed as like multi-generational kind of formidable names within Swiss Mormonism.
Yes, well, that would probably be a question a little more for my parents who might know a little further back, but certainly in every family you have a narrative or a story of how the first person accepting or joining the church. And our father told us also his story. I think it was a grand aunt of his that joined the church. Her husband didn't, and she started that legacy and that heritage. And so that is something in the families that is important families. And the ward that I grew up in was very strong in that regard. So it was the Gysler family, really. We had the Lauener family, the Weidmann family, and these were like three families that played or continue to play a big role in Switzerland, and very strong families where there were hardly any children falling off from the church, but because you were so different from all the others, the culture was very strong. And so for us, it was on the one hand being different from our peers at school, but then also within the church having a strong self-awareness that in addition to that, we are a special family.
Yeah, so you felt that. We visited the Swiss temple and learned that Switzerland was the first European country to get a temple. Is that right?
Yes, that was in the 50s.
1950s.
Yes.
So that means Switzerland was important, either central enough or important enough to be the first country dedicated, to have a temple dedicated.
Yes, I think it was the country not affected by Second World War, and also a very free country, very central. And yes, it has a very strong membership. And I felt that throughout my youth, it was a happy youth within the church. There was also quite a few young or children, or I had a peer group, and it felt really great, and it felt strong in a sense.
Yeah. So did your So was your grandfather an active member of the church on either side?
So on my father's side, he grew up in the church. So he was already born into a family that was devout to the church. My mother, she converted around her 20s and met my father. And so on her side, it was really her and her mother that joined the church themselves.
Okay. So your dad was a third generation...
I would say at least, yes, at least.
In Switzerland. And your mom was a first generation.
Yes.
But her mom converted.
Yes.
Okay. So what type of did your dad serve a mission?
Yes, he served a mission in the French-speaking mission. So I think it included part of Switzerland and France. And actually, I was also myself called to the French Paris mission. I grew up bilingual, my mother being from the French-speaking part of Switzerland, so the French-speaking culture always played a role in our family.
Okay. So having a grandfather who served a mission, that's kind of a big deal probably in Europe.
My father served a mission.
Both did?
No, my
okay.
grandfather, not sure about that. No, I don't think so. He served.
Okay. So having a dad that served a mission, that's probably still a big deal.
Absolutely. And it was something that we grew up with, that we children, we knew that one day we would serve in mission, the boys, at least.
And so what types of common Mormon activities did your family engage in during your childhood and, early young adult years?
So at the time I grew up, church was still morning and afternoon. And so it was really a Sunday that was filled with church. At the time, we didn't have a lot during the week. At my youngest age, actually, no, I have to correct that. On the Wednesday afternoon, we had primary, so that was still during the week, and I also enjoyed that time a lot and went there every week, and also to church.
Was it a branch when you were a child, or was it a ward?
No, it was a ward.
Okay.
It was a very strong unit with more than 100 active members and a lot of families.
Okay.
And so our week really centered around this Sunday going to church, Wednesday the primary, and we had family home evening every Monday. And
you did family home evening?
We did family home
in German? In Swiss German?
In Swiss German.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And
yes.
Did you remember liking those lessons or hating them? Do Europeans hate family home evening as much as U.S. children do?
Well, it was part of being a successful Mormon family, and David O. McKay saying that no success outside family can replace a failure within family, and so for us it was not a question whether we would do it or not. We had to, but yes, there was some incidences where there was some fights or something, but overall it was something we had to attend.
Did you guys do daily scripture study?
Yes, we started many times and usually succeeded for a short time.
Okay. Did you have a favorite or a couple favorite primary songs as a kid?
Well, yeah, ich bin ein Kind von Gott. I'm a child of God. That was obviously one that we sang a lot. And then I want to go on a mission. That was probably my favorite one.
Can you sing a little bit of that? Do you mind?
Ich möchte einmal auf Mission gehen, wenn ich ein Ende älter bin. Und hoffentlich bin ich bereit dann zu leben und zu predigen in Gottes Sinn. Something like that.
You're smiling so big when you sing that song. Why are you smiling so big?
Well, because it was an aspiration and something that I looked forward to.
So
being a missionary.
So you were just super excited to be a missionary as a young Mormon boy.
Yes,
okay.
I was.
Tell us any stories you want to about your childhood that you think might be important in forging your character and your commitment to not disappoint your parents.
Yes, so we were three children. I have an older sister, 2 years older, a younger brother, 3 years younger, and I was probably the child that was the one that I have a risk-taking nature, a very open nature, and I like to experiment. And at the time, I remember I was in second grade. I was fascinated, or I was together with a friend, and he asked me whether we should smoke one day. And we felt like, okay, we want to be grown-ups. And so we went to a grocery store, and we smoked some cigarettes. And we smoked these that evening that we stole them. And then another day we were in school, and around school we lit a cigarette, and someone reported us to the school teacher, and so we were called in by the school teacher, and the whole thing blew up, and it ended basically with me having to go with my parents to the store and confessing that we had stolen these cigarettes and done this terrible thing. And I remember at the time, or the reason I'm telling this story is one that formed me in the sense that I felt I never want to disappoint my parents again. I remember my mother, she was completely dissolved, crying how she had deserved this and almost feeling like I had fallen from grace. My father was much cooler about it and was, okay, let's discuss it, let's talk about this. And he really kept the calm, and it formed a relationship probably also between me and my father, that he would be the person also that I would go to more in terms of talking about problems, because he was very rational, very calm, and tried to help me. And my mother was more the emotional part, who really wanted to make sure that everybody's staying the course in the church, super devout to her husband and to her family. But it was so hard to see my mother cry that I felt I never want to disappoint her again. And so I really wanted to be a good boy. And my aspiration really was to be successful in this life, and to be the way that God wants me to, and progress towards perfection.
So in your adolescent years, as you start learning things like the law of chastity and the plan of salvation and word of wisdom, and you're coming into kind of puberty and your sexual awakening, and we're having stories about Sam Young and all that stuff, these days in 2018, how did all that affect you as a teenager? Anything you want to say about that?
The law of chastity was always something that my parents, and I think also in church, was stressed a lot. And so my view of this was really that this is the thing basically next to murder that in terms of sin you could do to break the law of chastity. And it was something that I think in terms of talking to church leaders I was never probed or so. I think it was talked about in a healthy way. Things like discovering your own sexuality, in terms of things like masturbation. That was certainly something that occupied my mind. It's something that my father discussed with me. He held regular interviews with us, and the way that he explained it to me was a bit the factory approach of
the little factories, Boyd K. Packer.
Yes, and telling me basically that there are young men that fall into that trap and start doing that, and I felt, whoa, that as if that was a complete minority. And it was something that I struggled with certainly during my youth, and that I was also sometimes very successful at oppressing it for quite some time. But I remember also really praying to Heavenly Father, strong prayers like, take away my sexuality. You can take it away forever, but take that bondage or that temptation away from you, which out of today's, if I look at back on this today, it's it's a very unhealthy thinking or behavior.
Right. How would you describe then overall your adolescent experience in the church? Did you go to seminary? Did you go to young men's, young women's, mutual? Was it fun or not fun?
So yes, we had a little bit of young men's. It wasn't every week, but occasionally we had something. In terms of seminary, we did that at home, and my sister and myself, I think my sister was more diligent than I was, so sometimes I took her booklets, and it was usually every week a new booklet, so it was a lot of work. And I sometimes copied that from my sister, to be honest. So I think I completed seminary, but I'm not 100% sure about my last year. Actually, maybe I don't have the 4-year certificate. So it was something that I did reluctantly, but I did it, I think.
And were you sort of taught the Bruce R. McConkie form of Mormon doctrine?
Mormon Doctrine is a book that I enjoyed reading during my mission, actually. So that this was the gospel, basically, that we learned there, and I was introduced to that book through my American companions. But yes, I think that the way that we understood the gospel was in a way very orthodox way of.
So like 6,000 year Earth, Adam and Eve were the first humans, signs of the times, Revelation. I'm just thinking about my upbringing, but a very fundamentalist, sort of orthodox, literalistic view that's kind of incompatible with science. Did you get all that in your upbringing, or was it different?
Yes, I told my high school teacher that I didn't believe in evolution, but that the world was 6,000 years old, and he laughed at me, and I felt the Spirit consoling me of yes, you did the right thing, Philip, and that the inhabitants of the American continent came through the Magellan Strait. So also there I corrected him and told him they come from Jerusalem by way of boats, or of a boat. So also there he was chuckling at me. So he knew I was a Mormon, and so did some of my other teachers, and sometimes they took me up on it.
Was your Patriarchal Blessing anything special for you?
I got my Patriarchal Blessing short time before my mission, and yes, it was a special moment. It turned out, hindsight, we'll come back to that, it was the grandfather of my wife who gave me my Patriarchal Blessing, and there were promises in there that were dear to me, and that I could identify with it.
Did you feel like you were kind of one of Saturday's Warriors, kind of chosen generation to usher in the second coming of Jesus? Did you have that sense as a high schooler, as a kid in high school?
That's what we were told as children, yes. There were also stories around patriarchal blessings where someone was promised that they would put the flowers in the temple before the second coming. So I felt it was imminent, yes.
Cool. So talk about, did you date at all in high school? And were there dances? Were there ward or stake or regional dances where high school kids in Switzerland were just dancing in a chapel somewhere to Michael Jackson or to U2 or George Michael or whatever the musicians would have been, all those Live Aid bands that I watched from the UK or from Europe?
Yes, we had that, and I have fond memories of the youth camps that I went to. So usually we try to dance every evening in those, and I had girlfriends inside and outside the church, and very much enjoyed my youth in that regard, always within boundaries. Obviously, but I had friends that played in a band outside the church, and so I went around with them. I usually had to be home by midnight on Saturday nights, But generally, I would say I had a happy youth, and really enjoyed being around inside and outside the church, other young people.
Do you remember any of your favorite songs to dance to at church dances?
I think it was some Footloose songs.
Footloose by Kenny Loggins?
Yeah, that's what we enjoyed, really going on that. But otherwise, I was more a bit heavy metal person, so I enjoyed
Scorpions.
Iron Maiden, Scorpions. I was actually at a Scorpions concert 2 years ago, and felt I was in the right place, because at the end of the concert, a member of the stake presidency, I walked into a member of the stake presidency, and we were both, we're in the good place. This is a safe place here. So I enjoyed Scorpions.
I would think you'd love Scorpions because their native language was German.
Yes, they played in English, but their native language is German, so I love the Scorpions too, but also AC/DC and others. I still love AC/DC now. Best rock.
Ozzy Osbourne and...
Well, less so.
What about Journey and Styx and Foreigner and Rush?
Yeah, Foreigner. I loved Foreigner. Jukebox Hero.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any famous Swiss that we don't realize are Swiss in the world? This is a random question. Musicians or actors or anything?
Oh, wow. That's great. Well, in terms of musicians, we have more a local, Swiss, German music scene. But, it's...
Nothing comes to mind?
No.
Okay, that's fine. Okay. So, how about... So, did you try and get, a testimony in your teenage years? Did you just always have it? Did you, when you heard about Moroni's promise in the Book of Mormon... Did you actually try and read the Book of Mormon cover to cover and then take Moroni up on his promise and kneel down and pray about it? Or did you never have a testimony or always had a testimony so you didn't need to pray about it? Talk about the formation of your testimony pre-mission.
So eventually, before going on a mission, I did have the desire to test Moroni's promise. And so I did that. I read the Book of Mormon cover to cover, just to have the full context of it, because when I read it in seminary, I still don't think I did the full Book of Mormon in seminary, but it was not in one flow, the whole story. And so I did that in a week, and I prayed and I tried, and I cannot say that I got a witness. It was more I felt good about certain chapters, like Alma 32 about faith, and many places in the Book of Mormon really made sense to me. And in the end, I felt, yes, maybe I had a warm feeling a little bit. So I felt I had a testimony really of the Book of Mormon, I think.
Okay, talk about, you mentioned you converted your girlfriend. Was that pre-mission?
Yes. So when I was about 18, I fell in love with this girl, and it was very intensive. And I introduced her to the church, and she eventually took the discussions, and I ended up baptizing her. So this was something that made me very happy, and also I felt very strongly that this was really a big step in my life, helping someone join the church, and certainly was also one of the reasons I felt even more excited about going on a mission. The sad part of it really was that her family almost cast her out for that, or basically disengaged with her. So she made a big sacrifice joining the church, and not only joining the church, but eventually waiting for me for 2 years while I would serve a mission. So this was an incredible sacrifice that she went through at the time.
And so she waited for you on your mission.
Yes, so she went to the French-speaking part of Switzerland and learned French there, and we wrote all through my mission. And when I came back, she was at the airport when I left for my mission, and she was at the airport when I came back from my mission, and we actually got married within 3 months.
Okay, we'll come back to that.
Yes.
So, did you always want to serve a mission? So when it came time to serve, were you excited or fearful or insecure? How did you feel on the eve of serving a mission?
So I was excited. I was excited to go to the France Paris mission. When I got my calling, this was, wow, yes, this is the country I'd love to go to. And of course, when I left, it was a sad moment. I felt, wow, I'm not going to see my family for so long. But I went to the London MTC, and it was like a family there. There was maybe 20 missionaries we were. And those 2 weeks there were already incredible in itself. I met there my best friend, even today. And he and me, we had a great time there, and also with the other missionaries. And by the time the MTC ended, I was super eager to go out and really get going. And I did. And I remember I was junior companion for 3 months, and my frustration of not being able to, my senior companion was a bit trunky. And we were even a threesome at the beginning, with one of them going home in 2 weeks. And I wrote the mission president, this cannot be this way. We once watched TV at a non-member, and I felt, you're never going to baptize like that. So super obedient missionary. I really wanted to make a difference. And I became senior right at the first transfer. So I was junior for 1 period. No, actually 2 periods. And then my second city, I turned senior, and finally I could really follow my own inspiration and work super hard. And it was a fulfilling time that I have very good memories of.
So that's Paris, France?
Yes.
And did you have success on your mission, numerical success? I know it's rude to ask that, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Well, I baptized in every city, so we had baptisms in every city.
Whoa, that's hard! Isn't France like super hard?
It is. Well, at that time, I think we had maybe still about 200 baptisms or so a year.
A year
in our mission,
which would be 20 a month.
Yes. So it was a good. Yes, you were able to have discussions. So we had between 3 and 15 discussions a week, and I enjoyed so much working with American companions. It taught me the English language more, and also there on my mission formed friendships that last till today.
And how good was your French going into the mission?
I was French speaking because I grew up bilingual.
Okay.
Yes.
So
I did not. So I hit the ground.
Okay.
Really running and served. I served in all parts of France, really, in the Normandy, in Paris, but then also in the southern part, like Bordeaux. So it got me all around the mission. I biked a lot, and I was in the metro a lot in Paris, and I also had good spiritual experiences.
Any you want to mention, or any worth mentioning, either converts or spiritual experiences worth mentioning?
I really trusted in the Lord. And so, for instance, one experience that I had was there was a problem with my permit to stay in France at I think about 3-4 months into the mission, and I couldn't find my staying permit. And I remember I prayed to have, I thought, okay, I'm going to pray and I'm going to find it. And so I prayed to Heavenly Father, super intensive. And I got up from my prayer. I turned around and like mechanically went to the wardrobe, opened it, and looked behind some clothes on a shelf and pulled out that permit. And to me, that was, wow, Heavenly Father really guided me in that. Or I had an incident where I was disappointed, and I felt discouraged, and I opened the Book of Mormon, and there was the case of Alma who went to Ammonia, and he didn't have success, and later he came back and met Amulek, and he converted Amulek. So I felt also Heavenly Father telling me I have to go back, and so I felt the divine, and that is also something to this day that hasn't left me. I view it a little bit in a different way, some things today. I don't think that Heavenly Father should help me find, or would help me find, my permit, while at the same time someone getting raped in another part of the country, he should help that person. So I don't believe in that kind of interference. That's certainly also a focus of thought, but I have a gratitude, and just that is a seed that I thank to my parents. They instilled in me that I feel the divine.
Any other mission experiences that were really formative for your story, or does that
not for my story?
Okay.
I was impressed by meeting often we also had to do with people that were a bit on the fringes of society. But then also I had a young law student that came out one day to church, and he was prepared to be baptized. He had read everything about the Mormons, and he basically said, how can I get baptized? I've read everything on Mormons, positive and negative. And he did co-teachings with us after 1 week, teaching other investigators, and got baptized within 2 or 3 weeks. And to me, that was Heavenly Father's gift to me for the labor that I had put in, that he would send me an elect.
Did you serve as a zone leader or an AP?
Yes. So the second half of my mission, I served as a zone leader, and I was a very dedicated zone leader. I was a dedicated zone leader to the point that once I got a lazy companion zone leader, and I was so frustrated that I told my frustrations to the mission president. I feel we should do more work and all that, and that rarely happens. My companion got bucked down.
Oh, demoted.
Demoted.
Yeah.
So he came off his call. It was his time to be transferred out of the city, and he came off the call, and I got bucked down. And yes, so I felt that my commitment, also my mission president, he really felt my commitment to this work, to the point that I had a very high level of trust of him.
Okay, so you completed 2 years of a mission, came home honorably, I assume. Talk quickly about, this is going back in time, but how did you experience the temple? So you went through in 87, which was before they made the big changes. How was your temple experience?
I think it's hard to feel perfectly good about the temple experience. It was something that caught me by surprise. I was prepared that there would be covenants in the temple, but obviously not prepared to the rituals that were there. My father was all along. So my father was all along there, and I had this deep trust in my father that while it was strange, it would be okay. And so I went through that, not quite understanding. And in the end, when I entered the celestial room, my family, my parents were there, and my father, he opened his arm and he said, Willkommen im Celestialen Reich. Welcome to the celestial kingdom. And that, in that moment, you know, these emotions, I felt this strongly, and so that was my point of reference that I liked to refer to when I thought about the temple, but I've never been a temple-going person very much. So I never became a temple worker or went regularly to the temple.
All right. Well, I'm sure you're not the only person who had that experience. So you get home off your mission, and then what happens?
So yes, I inscribed for university to study
Where?
business in St. Gallen, which is in Switzerland, the Harvard of Switzerland.
So it's a good school.
It's the best school for business. It only has business and law. And I got it. I had applied for there, and I saw my girlfriend again, and there was no question really whether we would be together or not. She had waited for me, and so we naturally got married within months, and I felt good about it. But at the same time, it was something that was just a course of action of fulfilling that wonderful story that was such a great story, right?
Yeah. Did you feel like God told you to marry her? Did you pray to say, is this the one? Or was it just you knew you would do it and there was no question?
There was no question
Okay.
on that.
All right. So how'd that marriage go?
Well, it's like in church when you get married, not living together. We got together and rubbed ourselves together and had our up and downs, but something was always a bit lacking in that marriage, and I don't know what it was exactly. Maybe it was also the alienation from her family, or also having joined the church just for myself, but we didn't feel so close, and during some time trust was gone, and eventually that marriage, after 2 years, we ended it. It ended in a divorce. We didn't have any children, and so I felt, and I hope she felt that way too, but we felt it's better for both to start over, really.
Now that's not part of the the Swiss Mormon dream. So you're multi-generational Mormon. You have a father who ends up as a stake president at some point. You're serving a mission. You're a zone leader. Marrying the temple. Divorce is not part of that plan.
No, it's not part of the plan, and so that was a big failure in my life, and I felt as a complete failure. I mean, the divorce is, I would have never envisaged that this would happen to me, and it was also to my family. My mother, again, for her, I think it was the biggest shock of this being possible, this happening. You're on the front line of membership talk for some time, and I also felt a lot of shame, and it caused me to take a break, actually, and I took a year off and interrupted my studies for a year, and went to work a bit and get my act back together.
Did it affect your testimony at all at the time?
No, I knew my way was in the church. It was certainly a time where I had to take a decision myself. The church council is put the vessel back together, and I felt that if I put that vessel back together, it will always leak water. And so...
Meaning the marriage?
Yes.
So you were being counseled to stay in the marriage?
Yes. I remember I even asked at the time my bishop, do you feel that? And he said, yes.
Do you feel what?
That I should be back together with, that we should make this work. So is this something you're telling me that you feel it? And he was young, and I don't think he was that experienced yet, but he gave me that strong indication. And I talked to my dad, and my dad was very supportive at the time. He said, "Philip, you are free. It's your life." And I really thank him for that he gave me this guidance and this room to really decide for myself, because the love of the children for their parents and their respect is so great that I think even though being a grown-up, I would have followed the advice of my father, and he left it open.
In your outline, you have this quote, "Divorce is never a solution." Was that
Yes.
told to you by your bishop before?
No, it's actually, that was a good friend that sent me that in a letter when I got married. I had served under Freddy Groib, who later became my new father-in-law. I had served under him as a youth representative, and he was the High Council for Youth. And he was a very strong High Council. He was himself engaged in social work with young people, and everybody liked and loved him. And he was one of those leaders to me that I went through the fire for, and I organized youth activities for the stake under his leadership. And when I got married, he sent me that letter, that congratulation letter to my wedding, where it was written, "Divorce is never a solution." And so when I got, or at the time where I was at the point of divorcing, I called him up and I said, "Hey, can I talk to you?" And I wanted to counsel with him. And I met him and I asked him, "What did you mean in that letter? It stuck with me that you wrote to me. I got all these congratulations from the others, and it stuck with me that you wrote to me, 'Divorce is never a solution.'" And we talked to each other, and he put that a bit into a relative, or he put that into the correct context, that he meant it and really listened to my story. And I also saw there very quickly when I arrived there, Milena, who later I met again and who became my wife. But it formed a very strong bond between me and my later to be father-in-law. And I really appreciated his counseling in this dark hour, which outside of my father was probably the second person that I really trusted that would give me counsel that is not just the church narrative or the church handbook counsel, but genuine, experienced, honest man counsel.
And so did he stick with that original quote, or did he change the story and say divorce could be okay?
He left it open to me too, based on the situation.
How did he reconcile that with the quote that he had given you when you first got married? Did he explain it or not? Did he say, "I know he wrote that in the letter, but I didn't mean
it"? He put it in a way, he told me the analogy of being together, as long as you're together in the same boat. If one of you leaves the boat, then there can be a case where, yes, it doesn't work.
And without going into detail, it wasn't just you guys didn't get along. There was probably, maybe a big event that there was you mentioned a breach of confidence. In other words, it wasn't just a matter of you guys not getting along, right? There was something, maybe some type of big event, right? Is that fair to say? You don't have to comment, but I don't want listeners to think it was just a matter of...
We did not have a base of trust anymore.
Yeah, okay. So trust eroded.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So that's interesting. Do you think that future father-in-law was kind of secretly hoping that you'd get divorced because he had his eye on you for his daughter, or not?
No, I don't think so. Actually, what happened is that my brother got married the following spring, and I was at that wedding, and my Milena, my wife, was there as well, because my brother married the cousin of my wife, and so she was obviously at that wedding as well. And we somehow got together. There was like there was an activity, or there was an interruption and an announcement. Everybody had to sit down, and there was one free spot besides Milena, and I ran there, and I fell right in. I slipped and fell right in front of her, and we started talking that evening, and we talked the rest of the evening, and it was love at first sight. And I think for everybody else, it was clear that, wow, something just clicked there. And she told me at the time, I'm going to a youth camp the following week. And I said, oh, I'm going there as well, or at a young adult camp, I'm going there as well. And I said, I'm going already on Wednesday. And she said, oh, I'm going on Friday. And so on Wednesday, I drive towards that camp, and I see all of a sudden that there is a sign that points to the village where my Milena lives. And so I felt, oh, I'll just drive by there and pay her a visit. And so I drive by her house, and her father is outside, and start chatting with him and talking to him. And he talks to me like for 20 minutes. And then I ask him, is Milena here as well? And he goes, no, she already left for the camp. And I was like, oh, I thought she was only going on Friday. And she said, oh, she changed her mind. And so I arrive at that camp, and I see Milena. And I'm like, oh, you already left. You came already early. And I was, why did you come early? And she was, you know why. And so that camp was we just enjoyed coming together. It was, we knew the end of it, and we just enjoyed that time that slowly we were coming together. And for me, it was at the beginning, I was very reluctant, because I was divorced not long time ago, and I felt, oh, I'd rather windsurf or surf, and women, that's done for me. I'm done with marriage. And I said to Milena, after I kissed her, I said, not sure we should be, or I'm ready for this. And she said, we don't have to tell somebody. And so I was like, well, maybe we can keep our friendship secret, but we didn't do that. So eventually it was a year between my divorce and myself getting married again. And I was first a bit afraid of my father-in-law being reluctant, basically being this friend. But once I start eating into his turf, that he would be, oh, no, I don't want my daughter to marry a divorced guy. But it was him who pushed it in the end, because he felt that myself having been married already, he was a bit worried that we would step over a line together. And so he talked to us, and he was basically, well, if you guys know you should be together, then get married. And I felt like, oh, this is going to be stress again. And he was like, well, life is stress, but if you have the right partner, that's not stress. It should be the opposite. And it was. So we got married.
So was there no sense on the part of your girlfriend and her parents that you were damaged goods for having been divorced? Sort of like this stigma or black mark where a valiant young woman or her parents would be like, stay away from him. He's been divorced. That's a bad sign.
I was a little worried that could be the case, but that wasn't the case at all. And she comes from a great family as well. Her grandfather being the patriarch, and at the time, my father being at the same time a patriarch, actually, because he was very old, her grandfather. So it was basically patriarch and patriarch family coming together. And it was like it would be my first marriage. It was a dream marriage. And obviously both families really coming together close. Our families were close anyway. My father much appreciated the Groib family, which is also a multi-generation family in the church. And so
Didn't her dad serve as stake president at some point as well?
No, he served as bishop.
Okay.
And high council.
Okay.
So.
And then patriarch.
Her dad, not her grandfather.
Oh, grandpa. Okay. Got it. Okay, so almost kind of a royal wedding. Now, was this, a Mormon royal, a Swiss Mormon royal wedding? Is that over dramatizing it?
It was a wedding between children of good families.
Yeah. You're being
Yes,
modest.
and I think also to Milena, to me it felt like Heavenly Father had corrected a mistake in my life. And it gave me maybe also the failure of my first marriage gave me a higher awareness for what I really have in my wife. And so gave me even a higher appreciation for her.
And so you knew it was the right thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're still married.
How many years later?
26 years, yes.
Okay. Fun. All right. Well, that's a fun follow-up to that first not so good marriage. All right. So you get married, and tell us what I think I want to do is for this first part, kind of go to the part where right before you start questioning. So we'll kind of finish out all the years leading up to the beginnings of your faith crisis. Does that make sense? So let's finish the story up until that point.
So we lived in my home ward, Winterthur, which was a very strong ward.
Is this Zurich area?
This is about 20-30 minutes from Zurich, yes, Zurich area.
And that's German-speaking Switzerland?
Yes.
Okay.
Same ward as my parents, same ward as my sister and her family. Very strong ward, and the ward I grew up in.
And the stake was what?
Zurich.
Zurich stake. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And I got the bishop was from Matthias Weidmann, so the Weidmann family, which again is a very strong family, and he called me into the bishopric, which was a great honor for me. And so I served in the bishopric for a number of years, and had.
Were you pretty young?
Yeah, I was in my 20s.
Yeah, in the United States, that would be more rare for someone in their 20s to make the bishopric.
Yeah.
But that might be more common.
I was in my
Europe.
mid-20s.
26 or something?
Yeah, 25 maybe, something like that.
That's pretty early.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I profited there from the leadership of experienced men around me. And there followed a few wonderful years, really. I completed my studies. I started working as an investment banker for what later became UBS, and had a good experience there as well. And at some point, I professionally felt that it wasn't so fulfilling anymore, because it was more taking almost a bit the cream off the milk, being a banker.
What do you mean by that?
I mean by that you're not creating something. Being a banker is more arbitraging.
Right.
You're taking something out in between, but I didn't have the sense of creation, that what I'm doing is doing something good. I was fulfilling orders of someone, or I was trading stock, but I didn't have the feeling that I was serving a greater purpose, or that I was doing something really good for society. And banking has a bit, and received obviously with the financial crisis even more, a stigma of profiting, although I was making very good
probably profiteering
money.
Is what
profiteering,
you mean.
yes.
Yeah.
I was making at a young age very good money, being the sales department of a bank, selling to institutional investors. And so at some point I felt after 4 years I needed to make a change, and I got involved with a friend through actually a mutual friend. I was close befriended with the wife of a convert, Freddie Gantner, who had started a new firm, Partners Group. It was a small firm, and I got together with him, and he told me about private equity, or basically the investments in non-listed stock, where you would instead of just arbitraging stock, you would actually give money to build up companies, to improve companies, to make them better. And
like
so
venture capital.
Exactly, venture capital and buyouts. And so that alluded to me very much. And so
How's that better than banking?
You're investing money in businesses where the money is invested for where that money takes control of businesses, is invested for several years, and you improve a business. You create value in a business, and you earn money by selling that business after you have created value at a higher price. So if you make money, you will have improved the business. You will have created jobs within that business. So venture capital, private equity, is money that is directed to opportunities in order to help them grow.
Does that mean that you get into the operations of the business and help consult them, to help work with them to make the businesses more successful?
Yes, eventually it does. And we dabbled also a bit into that. But at the beginning, we basically invested in other private equity funds. So we sought operations that invested in such opportunities on a global basis, because we were autodidact in that sense, that we were the new kids on the block. We had no idea about private equity, really. We got into that business by financial engineering or innovation, which is what we were good at. So we came from different banking backgrounds, the founders from Goldman Sachs. So they had an idea about selling and an idea about financial innovation. And that's how we started being. And we sold something that we produced once we had sold it, basically. So it was a company, a crazy company, you could say, super entrepreneurial and super over self-confident, that achieved. And it was friends and family. So I had known the CFO from my youth. He was also a church member. I brought in my brother-in-law into the company, who also became a partner. So at the beginning, this was, who do we know? And we brought in these people, and the partnership for the first, I was basically one of the first partners that left 13 years later. It never had any defections. It was almost like a church community, you could say. Very coherent, very strong culture with deep, deep friendship that lasts until today, and the company where everything is possible. So about...
And just, not to interrupt, but just to give listeners a sense for this, as I understand it, I was told this the day before yesterday, that the gentleman who started the company, what's his name again?
Freddie Guntner.
He's a billionaire. Like, he's worth a couple billion. That's what I was told by somebody else. So that's just to give people a sense that this became a very significant company. Am I getting that wrong? I'm not asking you to divulge anything.
It became, yes, I think this is public knowledge. It became a very successful company. In 2006, the company was listed on the Swiss Stock Exchange, and today it's one of the larger financial firms. So it has today a market cap close to 20 or around $20 billion.
Yeah. And you were employee number what, approximately?
Approximately number, I would say, between 15 and 20.
And yeah,
early days.
And it's kind of like a Mormon Goldman Sachs, and a Swiss Mormon Goldman Sachs. Is that
not quite? So
how would you describe it?
One of the founders
or Bain,
was
or
one
Bain
of
Capital?
one of the founders was or is LDS. The other two founders were not. So Mormons were always a minority, but Mormons attract Mormons, and so there were a number of Mormons in the company, and myself later being assigned to build up the U.S. office or start the U.S. office in New York. I went to BYU, and also there hired Mormons, a lot of Mormons, also of course from other universities, but BYU was a stronghold of us. The founder being a graduate from the Marriott Business School.
Cool. Well, that's a huge accomplishment, to build a company of that high value and to be a principal partner.
It's a high integrity company that to this day is very successful and that I have highest regards for. and that is probably the largest player, or certainly the largest player in Europe today, and still has a lot of the attractions it had in the early days. It has kept very strong and good culture.
Well, cool. Well, anything else you want to share about your story before the cracks in your testimony started emerging?
Well, yes. I mean, it's. I experienced the church as a wonderful community. Also, moving abroad. So in 2000, we sat around the table at the firm and we agreed that we should go to the U.S. And we asked, okay, who wants to go? And I said, okay, I'll ask my wife. And my wife didn't speak any English. And I asked her, you want to go to the U.S.? And she was, yeah, let's do it. Let's have a change. So we moved to the U.S. and I took some office space, started hiring people, started investing there, and built up the company for the next 2 years there. Immediately when we arrived in New York, we found a wonderful church community. It was a ward that had not a lot of foreign.
What area? Brooklyn?
The
Manhattan?
Just outside of north of New York, the Scarsdale. Scarsdale ward is
Okay.
ours. We lived in Rye, a wonderful community there.
What stake do you remember?
It
It's not
was
important if you don't remember.
Oh, was it one of the North New York stakes?
Okay.
I couldn't
Scarsdale
say
ward,
that.
that's fine.
Scarsdale, yes,
Okay.
one of the Scarsdale wards. And there were people there from all over the U.S. Obviously, that you have a lot of people on assignment in New York, and we had game nights together with other families. We met regularly together, had raclette nights at our place. So
What games?
like nights you come together, you play some games.
Like what games?
You do
Charades or
yes, it's
Settlers of Catan? Any German board games?
No, it was more like pantomime games,
Okay.
stuff like that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you do games together, and you visit regularly with each other, and you form friendships. We still write Christmas cards to each other. Overall, a great time. And I felt moving to a new place, also for my family, we immediately felt adopted into a new community, and that is a wonderful aspect of the church. Yeah, maybe this is a good time to interrupt there, because once on our move back, that's where becoming a branch president. So I think that's a good seizure here.
All right. So thank you for joining us for part one of our interview with Philipp Gysler. It's been fun to hear about his upbringing in the church and his first marriage and his second marriage, and then how he builds this career. What we'll be talking about in part two is how he ascended up the ranks of church leadership, including becoming a branch president, and then eventually a member of a stake high council. But along the way, how some cracks started developing in his faith, and then how he dealt with that. And this includes mixed faith marriage for quite some time, as I understand it. And so we'll see if that's true. But we'll please don't go away. Please come back immediately if you can for part two of my interview with Philipp Gysler, as we seek to understand the Mormon experience in Switzerland. So thanks for joining us, and catch us on the flip side. Thanks, everybody.